Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Seems like a sad and distant memory right now with a homegrown quarterback like Patrick Mahomes ruling the roost in the National Football League, but homegrown quarterback and the Kansas City Chiefs were an oxymoron throughout almost all of their history. From the very first bit of success with the Super Bowls in the late 60s and early 70s with Len Dawson, who was originally drafted by Pittsburgh, and on through the history of the Chiefs where they took on other people's quarterbacks and tried to make it work. Oftentimes it didn't. A few times it really did, and one of those times was in the early 2000s with Trent Green, who had been persevering in the National Football League and trying to make a mark for almost a decade when he came to the Kansas City Chiefs in his late 20s and carved out some fantastic success for a great offense led by a fantastic offensive line, fine running backs, and also his great performance through 2005. His career was eventually derailed by concussions, but his story of perseverance in leading to Kansas City is the first part of our two-part conversation with Trent Green. The next part will come up next Friday. It's an interesting, fascinating, and in-depth story, and it takes a lot of telling, which is why, when we conclude this first part, Trent Green will just be arriving in Kansas City to carve out his time with the Kansas City Chiefs. A great conversation with Trent Green, the first part of which comes your way next, right here on Kansas City Profiles, presented by Easton Roofing. We're here with Joe Spiker, the CEO and president of Easton Roofing. And Joe, you had a great year in 2019, a record year. 2020 comes, things are moving smoothly along, and then the coronavirus comes. But your company seemed to be very ready, very proactive, and very ready to serve your customers well.
Yeah, we adopted social distancing very early before the cities even put out the notices, and we started working from home. We are largely cloud-based as a company, so that transition was easy. Our technicians are wearing masks and gloves, and salespeople are not meeting with homeowners. We're doing everything digitally and doing everything we can to do our part to get over this as quickly as possible.
So for any needs that people have right now, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can always call us, 913-257-5426, but the best way is to go to eastonroofing.com. Put your information in and we'll give you a call.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters.
Hi, this is Matt Llewellyn from 23rd Street Brewery. Thank you, Kansas City, for supporting all the local restaurants during this time of crisis. Starting Thursday, May 21st, the 23rd Street Brewery will be open from 11 to 9 for carry-out and delivery service and 4 to 9 for dine-in and patio service, if you can believe that. We're open. During this phase, we will adhere to the Douglas County recommendations for restaurants, and please see our website or our Facebook page for details. Most importantly, we want all of our guests and staff to stay safe, and together we will all get through this.
My friends at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture are among the most accomplished and trusted clinics in the nation. Only one clinic has been rated in the top 5 in all 3 categories of chiropractic care, acupuncture, and rehabilitation, and that clinic is ASFCA. They have locations in Olathe, Overland Park, Prairie Village, Belton, and Lee Summit. Doctors Brad and Christina Woodle and their accomplished team of doctors and therapists will treat you like family, for the simplest of injuries to the most complicated conditions to avoid surgery. Whether you are seeking treatment for an injury or just looking to stay healthy and fit, this is the place for you. And it's been the place for me for almost 2 years now. I have been a strenuous daily exerciser for years, and as time goes on, that takes its toll. But regular appointments at Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture have helped keep me ticking on, and even as the years pile up, their regular care has allowed me to keep to my regimen and feel great. If you want to feel the same, give them a call or visit them at asfca.com/Danny. They accept all insurances and are open Monday through Saturday, and make sure to mention that Danny Clinkscale recommended Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Trent, you were born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and probably don't remember much of that because you moved away at 5, but you probably do remember a few years that you spent in the Bloomington, Illinois area. What was it life like for little Trent Green?
You know, the thing about it, I loved the way I grew up. Cedar Rapids wasn't a big town. Both my grandparents lived there, so we went back quite a bit. Both my parents were raised in Cedar Rapids, and so We spent a lot of time there. And then we moved to this small town, outside of Bloomington, Illinois. And it was cool. It was a rural area. It was one of those things, I think a lot of people that were born in the 70s can maybe relate to. You'd come home, you get off the school bus, you hop on your bike, and you were gone until either the sun set or my mom started yelling and it was time to come in for dinner or whatever it may be. But yeah, it was a lot of outside time because we were kind of out in the country a little bit, in between the city and the country. And so, a lot of dirt bikes and stories and building forts and, BB guns, shooting cans at the railroad tracks and just kind of some of that. So I loved it. My parents made the decision. My dad was transferred. That's why we lived in the different cities and ultimately ended up back in St. Louis or growing up in St. Louis. We moved there when I was in 5th grade. But yeah, those 4 years, there were lots of fond memories.
Did you have siblings?
I did. Older brother, 2 years older, and then a younger sister. That was quite a bit younger, but 8 years younger than me. So, most of my running around was with my brother and the other neighborhood kids.
A couple of years older, that's somebody to look up to and maybe to beat you up a little bit. So what was your relationship like with your brother?
I have a great relationship with my brother. It was one I tell people all the time, I think he was a better natural athlete than me. So I was continually trying to catch him and hang with his friends and be able to keep up. And as I've talked to people over the years, I give him a lot of credit because, he could have easily been, oh, little brother, get away. But it was also a motivator for me because I knew if I couldn't hang on the basketball court or hang on the football field or hang at baseball or whatever it was we were doing, I knew they weren't going to let me play. So it was a motivator for me just to try and, be with him and be with his friends. And, so yeah, that was a big motivator for me. So we were close and probably the best year I had would have been my sophomore year of high school because he was a senior in high school. And I played varsity football and varsity basketball. And so he and I got to play. That was really our only season that we played together, like actual organized sports. So that was a very, very memorable year around my household.
Well, obviously, it was a time when people played multiple sports and didn't really focus necessarily on one. When you were growing up and developing as an athlete, was there one sport that you liked better, that you were better at? What was that like?
It was that would be basketball. I always thought basketball was going to be my thing. When I moved to, first of all, prior to all the concussion stuff, my parents were they just didn't believe in playing tackle football until you were in 7th grade. Had more to do with, they don't think your bones are developed or that kind of thing. It didn't have to do with the head part of it. It had to do more with the bones of it. So, that was, so anyway, I didn't really play football till then. And it was, mainly basketball that I did. And, I was a basketball junkie. I constantly wanted to be playing basketball. We had a basketball in the driveway. When we moved to St. Louis, that was a big move, because I joined a traveling team. We did all the AAU tournaments. I got in some national tournaments. It was basketball was my thing. And it was kind of funny. I ended up going to Indiana to play football and all my grade school kids that I went to grade school and junior high with in St. Louis, they all thought I went to Indiana to play basketball. I would run into them when I was back from college, and they're like, "Oh, it's great that you ended up at Indiana to play basketball." I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm at Indiana playing football." They're like, "What? You play football?" So it was like, it was different. But basketball was always my thing. And
when was it that the course changed to where your future would lie in football?
It would have been my sophomore year. So getting the opportunity to start, and like I said, I started in basketball as well. But with football, it just kind of clicked. I was a tall kid, not real heavy. I think I was maybe as a sophomore, I was 6'2", 175 or something like that. But we had a really good team. We went 9-2 that year. I had a couple of linemen on my team that were my brother's age. One went to the University of Iowa. My brother ended up playing at JUCO for a couple of years and then ended up at Northern Iowa playing receiver up for the Panthers. I'm trying to think. Let's see. We had one lineman that went to Central Missouri State. We just had some good players. We like I said, we went 9-2. We lost to St. Louis U High twice. They happened to have Henry Jones, who ended up being a Pro Bowl safety for the Bills and was on all those Buffalo Bills Super Bowl teams. So,
right.
It was that was when it kind of clicked for me when the recruiting process started. And I said, wait a second, you mean somebody's going to pay for me to go to their school and I can get a free education? And at that time I didn't have. I think everybody dreams of playing in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever it is. But at that point in time, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. It was, we never, it wasn't like we were struggling, but it wasn't like my parents were just going to be able to pay for my school. So I was trying to figure out how I was going to get into college and pay for college. And so, when all of a sudden the football thing jumped up and people were starting to talk to me as a sophomore in high school, I was like, well, I think I'm going to turn my focus to this. Cause I was really, I'd only been playing football since 7th grade. So, it was only, it was only my 4th year playing. And so I was really starting to get the itch and the passion for it. Not that I was losing it for basketball, but it was just something new and I was good at it and people were paying attention to it. So.
Did you play basketball all the way through high school?
I did. And I ended up having a couple of, smaller school offers. It was just everybody kind of knew at that point I was pretty far down the road from a football standpoint. So
was it because you said you're a basketball junkie and everything? Was it a difficult thing in any way to shift your focus to football?
No, not really. Just because football was going well for. Like I said, my sophomore year we went 9-2, and I was getting all this attention from college coaches, and I really just found a great passion for it. I liked. So let's backtrack a little bit. I don't know how much. So when I started playing football in 7th grade, I didn't necessarily want to play football. I liked football. I played flag football. I'd messed around, in the yard with my brother and his friends and that kind of stuff. But I didn't really have. I was, like I said, I was a basketball guy. And my parents were like, no, you're gonna, you need to play football. Well, my first year playing football, like I said, was 7th grade. I was bigger than most of the kids, but I was also fairly athletic. So I actually, my first year playing football, I was the starting left tackle on offense, and I was the starting free safety on defense. So pretty combination. But I didn't start playing quarterback until probably the 3rd game of my 8th grade year. In 8th grade, I started out. My brother was a receiver, so I always wanted to be a receiver. So I was either I was a receiver and a defensive back. I was a safety again my 8th grade year, and I really loved safety. A quarterback broke his collarbone. Our starting quarterback in 8th grade broke his collarbone, and we didn't, at that time, there's not a ton of kids to go out, so we didn't really have a backup quarterback.
Right.
And the coach is like, we need a backup quarterback. And I didn't raise my hand. I didn't mention anything about being a quarterback. Well, for all these years that my brother was playing and that I played with my brother, because he was the older brother, he would be, hey, you're throwing me the ball because I'm the receiver. So I had been throwing to him for years, but I just didn't want to play quarterback.
Right.
So, to me, my dad and my brother went up to the coach one day at practice and said, I know you're looking for a quarterback. You need to play him at quarterback. And he said, well, he doesn't want to play quarterback. He didn't raise his hand. And my dad and my brother said, trust us, he can throw the ball. You need to try him at quarterback. So I reluctantly, the coach gave me the you got to do it for the team, and we need you and all that stuff. And I reluctantly started playing it and just fell in love with it. So I played, and I got the I got the heck beat out of me, I'll put it that way, because we weren't very good in 8th grade, and I don't even know if we won a game with me as a starting quarterback in 8th grade. But even though I was getting beat up, I just fell in love with the position, and it really kind of opened my eyes to the game in a different way than it did playing those other positions. So then, my freshman year, it kind of kept feeding it a little bit more, and then my sophomore year, like I said, when I was able to be the starting quarterback on varsity with a really good team and a bunch of good nucleus guys around, I was like, you know what, this quarterback. So, then I fell in love with it, and I was going to quarterback camps and reading books on it and trying to learn as much as I could about the position. So that's really when the passion kind of kicked in for me.
So when did talk about the recruiting process? You mentioned that you ended up with some small offers in basketball, but people knew you were on the track for football. What was the recruiting process like, and when did it heat up for you?
It really started. I started, getting all the letters and all that stuff. Now it's all different, but
Right.
Back then it was, they'd send. You check the mailbox every day to see who you're getting a letter from. So it was mainly the Big Ten and the Big Eight. At that time, I was getting some outliers. There was a few Southern schools like Louisville and Kentucky and something like that. I didn't go all the way down, down south. I think I maybe got a few letters from Florida and Florida State and that kind of stuff, but nothing real serious. A few Texas schools here and there, mainly Rice. Rice wasn't very good at the time, but it was a great academic school. I actually took one of my visits to Rice because I loved the school. Mm-hmm. And it just, like I said, their football program wasn't very good at the time. So, so it was mainly the Big Ten and the Big Eight. I was followed or Notre Dame was recruiting me for a while. Then they stopped for a while, and then they came back to me at the end of it. So that was an opportunity. They ended up offering me right at the end, like in the final weeks of recruiting. But I had already I ended up taking a visit there. But I in my mind, I kind of knew I wanted to go to Indiana. They were an up-and-coming program, and I knew I wanted to play in the Big Ten and all those kinds of things. And I wanted to be a business major, so I ended up at Indiana.
So was that the biggest selling point about Indiana, or what else did you like about it?
So my dad went to the University of Iowa. I grew up, as I said, being born in Cedar Rapids. My grandparents on my dad's side had season tickets to football games, basketball games, wrestling. So I kind of was a huge Iowa Hawkeye guy. Went to Lou Olson basketball camps, went to George Raveling basketball camps, went to Hayden Fry football camps. We would go to, the dual wrestling meets when Dan Gable was the wrestling coach. I mean, I was all in on Iowa, and Kirk Ferentz was the offensive line coach at the time under Hayden Fry. And he was the one that recruited my school. As I said, I had two of my offensive linemen go, one from my sophomore year and one from my junior year that ended up at the university. Around our school all the time. And it would have been a layup to go to Iowa, but they had a bunch of quarterbacks. They had Mark McGuire's brother, Dan McGuire. Mm-hmm. They had Chuck Hartlead. I think they had 6 quarterbacks on scholarship. I'm going to look elsewhere, and it was all very, friendly. And it's funny now because Kirk being the head coach there, Barrett Alvarez was the defensive coordinator, and he was a longtime coach at Wisconsin, so I played against him a bunch. Snyder ended up at Kansas State. Snyder was actually the quarterback coach when Jimmy and I were going through the camps. Bob Stoops was a defensive back that was transitioning from being a player to being a grad assistant to ultimately being assistant coach there, and then going with Snyder to K-State. So there's a lot of guys that were on that staff, both as players and as coaches, that I got to know over the years and reacquainted with. But so it just I had been grown up around the Big Ten and knew a lot about it. As I said, Indiana was that year. I guess I graduated in '88, so that year in '87 they had finished second in the Big Ten to Michigan State. Michigan State had Tony Mandarich and that whole crew. So Indiana finished second, kind of up and coming program. It it was about a 4-hour drive from my house to campus, from St. Louis to Bloomington, Indiana. So I knew my parents could get there. There was a lot of good things about it. It was, as I said, so my official visits were, this is a weird combination, Danny. You're going to crack up on this. So my official visits were, I said Rice was one of them. My second one was Oklahoma State. So Mike Gundy, who's now the head coach, he was my host. He was a senior on that team. They had a sophomore running back named Barry Sanders that nobody really knew of because Thurman Thomas had just left there. They had a great wide receiver that ended up getting about half of college football on probation, Hartley Dykes.
Right.
He had been a big recruit. They got a bunch of people on probation because of his recruitment. So Oklahoma State was my second visit. Indiana was my third visit. Illinois was supposed to be my fourth visit. Mike White was the head coach, who ended up being the assistant coach under Dick Vermeil when I was here with the Chiefs. So Mike White was the head coach at Illinois, and I really thought that's where I was going because he had Jeff George, where he currently had Jeff George at the time. You know, you had Jack Trudeau and Tony Easton. I mean, he had some good quarterbacks come through there, and it was even closer to St. Louis. So I thought for a long time that's where I was going. And then he calls me on the Wednesday before I was supposed to take my visit, and he said, "Hey, the NCAA is coming hard on us, and I've got to step down as head coach. We're going on probation. The school would still like to offer you a scholarship, but just so you know what's happening." And obviously, I had told him, I said thanks, but I'm not going to go there.
I'm not in for that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so then, like I said, Notre Dame came back. They had recruited me early, dropped me for a while because they were going after a guy named Tony Saka, who ended up going to Penn State, starting there, and then Brett Johnson, who ended up starting at UCLA as a freshman, injured his knee, and then ended up transferring to Michigan State. His younger brother, Rob Johnson, played in the NFL for a while, long time with the Buffalo Bills and the Jaguars. But so Brett and Tony were the two big guys, and of course Todd Marinovich was the main guy, but he was a SoCal guy and was staying at USC. So those were the three main guys. And Notre Dame tended to get whoever they were recruiting. They really thought they were going to get Saka away from Penn State, but that didn't work out. So anyway, they left me for a while. Then after they didn't get those guys, they came back and started recruiting me again. So after Mike White had called me on Wednesday and told me what was happening at Illinois, Notre Dame was actually at the school, not knowing what was going on with Illinois, but they were at the school the next day and said they wanted me to take a visit and they were going to offer me. And so I took a visit there. I mean, it was like Notre Dame, I got to listen, right? So I went and, Indiana was just the right fit for me. When it all came down to it, it was just the right fit for me. Growing up around the Big Ten, they ran a traditional, more of a pro-style offense. They had Anthony Thompson there, who ended up winning the Maxwell and being the runner-up to Andre wearing the Heisman Trophy. So we had a good team, good pro system. Lou Holtz was running more of an option system up at Notre Dame. Didn't really fit what I did. It was just the right fit for me. And I made the right choice for me.
Certainly did, and obviously you ended up in the Indiana Hall of Fame and 3 great years there. People probably don't think of Indiana as a good football program, but you're talking about coming off a second-place finish. You played in 3 consecutive bowl games. I guess we don't need to get into what has happened to Indiana football, but it was pretty good football at that point in time. Did you enjoy the entire experience, both academically, socially, and football-wise?
Yeah, I love my time at Indiana. It's, from a football standpoint, I redshirted my first year. I was all for that. I was not interested in being that guy. I know that's a big thing now for kids coming out of high school. They all want to play right away. I wanted to learn how college worked. I wanted to, adjust to the academic schedule and the athletic schedule. I knew I needed to gain weight. I gained over 20 pounds my freshman year just because of eating and consistent lifting. And I didn't really lift a lot. I mean, that wasn't the thing, back when I was growing up. I mean, it wasn't a lot of, these training centers and lifting and everything else. It was, you just went sport to sport to sport, and that's what it was. And, so it was the first time I was really on a lifting regimen and a eating eating whenever I wanted, as much as I wanted, just because I was trying to gain weight. So, yeah, it turned out really well. Academically, I ended up getting into the business school. So I have my degree from Indiana, the business school there. You know, so I'm proud of that. As I said, the football thing, we went to 3 bowl games. I was the starter. Ended up being the backup my redshirt freshman year. Got hurt a little bit, but still got into a couple games. Started which would be my 3rd year, my redshirt sophomore year. Started the first 7 games. We were 4-2-1. We had just tied Ohio State. We had just lost to Michigan. I got benched for 4 games because they wanted to go to a more mobile quarterback that could run around and run the option, which is kind of funny now that looking back on it. But then I got the job back before the bowl game. We played Auburn in the last Peach Bowl that was at Fulton County outside in the mud and the rain. And it kind of years later, it was funny to learn that Tony Richardson was a freshman on that Auburn team. So T. Rich and I got to play against each other in college before we became teammates at Kansas City. But the overall experience in Indiana was great. I love my head coach, Bill Mallory, who just recently passed away. Mm-hmm. Great mentor, great person. Just continued building that foundation for me and my passion for football and passion for how to treat people and how to work and work ethic. And then ultimately I met my wife there. So, that covered all 3 phases for me at the school, the social, the academic, and the athletic. So I'm happy with the decision I made.
Tell me how you met your wife.
So yeah, she was in a sorority. I was not. Bill Mallory was a big fan of your football team is your fraternity. The campus life or fraternity life is big at IU. So she had asked me to a dance. It was our sophomore year. She likes to tell everybody or remind everybody that when she asked me to that dance, I was on the bench. So I told you I started the first 7 games.
Right.
I started the first 7 games my redshirt sophomore year. While I was on the bench is when we met. And actually one of her sorority sisters was dating the kicker on the team, which one of the kicker was one of my roommates. I had 5 roommates. We were all players. So yeah, anyway, she asked me to the dance and, next thing you know, we dated for a few weeks and I became the starter again right before the Peach Bowl. So she likes to take a lot of credit, all these years later that, the reason my career turned around was when we started dating. So, I like to agree with that. That's why I've been married so long.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
We're visiting with Larry Marshall, former Chiefs defensive back and punt returner and now a Chiefs ambassador. Larry is a former pro football player with the aches and pains that come with that, and moving on in age as we all are. What do the Canaway CBD products do for you?
It's been a great relief for me. Being a punt and kickoff returner, collisions were a mainstay of my career, and these Canaway products, the salve especially, has really helped me try to get through every day with the aches and pains that I've had over a career of 7+ years in the NFL.
I get similar benefits as well, particularly with my back. Certainly wasn't a football player. What's the best way for our listeners to get more information about the great products themselves?
Well, I'm so enthused about it, Dana. They just contacted me at larrymarshall.canaway.com, and I can give them all the information they need to help them get through the day as well.
Start gaining all the benefits that Larry and I do from the trusted and reliable line of Canaway products. As Larry said, visit larrymarshall.canaway.com and get information on all the great products from Canaway.
For many people, a family law case will be one of the most difficult experiences in their life. The law firm of Kenneth McRae will help you through it. Personal and effective help from Ken in concert with you will develop a unique strategy for your unique case. As Ken always says, divorce can be civil law, not civil war. Licensed in Kansas? Visit McRaeLawOffice.com or call 913-972-4765.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson & Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. My guest is Trent Green, obviously a fantastic quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs and longtime professional career, and certainly an interesting one to say the least. And as you're concluding what was a very successful career as a quarterback at Indiana, but, you weren't first-team All-American or anything. What were your thoughts as far as the future in professional football? Did you have those aspirations maybe starting junior year, or was this kind of a surprise or a thing that you were just going to try out? What was it like? What was the process like?
So, I didn't really have, like I said, I went to Indiana because somebody was paying for my school, and it was a great business school, and Indiana wasn't the football factory at that time, or even since then. I mean, there's a number of IU players sprinkled throughout the league, but that wasn't my main focus. So at the end of my sophomore year, I go to my junior year. We ended up our starting running back at the time was a player named Vaughn Dunbar. He ended up being an All-American, ended up being a first-round pick of the New Orleans Saints. So we went to my junior year, which would have been my redshirt senior year or my fourth year. We ended up switching from that pro style, what we ran with Anthony Thompson, which was a lot of two tight ends and, running downhill, fullback in the backfield, play action pass, hitting the flat, hitting the tight end, occasionally hitting a deep throw. We went from a lot of that to Vaughn to take best of his talents. We switched to a one-back. So we split the tight ends out. We added 3 wide receivers, which gave me more freedom at the line of scrimmage, which kind of opened things up. So not only did Vaughn earn first-team All-American that year, I ended up setting the school record in passing yards, and we just kind of opened things up. So all of a sudden, at the end of that year, scouts started coming around because obviously they were looking at Vaughn, and we had an offensive lineman by the name of Ian Beckles that ended up getting drafted in the 3rd or 4th round to the Buccaneers. And so we had some linemen. We had another tight end that got drafted. I mean, we had some good players on that offense. So they started coming around in attention, and I was like, well, wait a second, because they kept saying, hey, we got our eye on you. We got our eye on you. And I was like, wait a second. You mean I got a chance to play in the NFL? So then all of a sudden, that's when it all that was kind of the eye opener for me, is when they came in and started talking to those other guys and look at those other guys. They would pass by me in the hall at the complex and say, hey, keep it going. We got our eye on you for next year. And so then all of a sudden that's when it started to click for me, like, hey, maybe I do have a chance. So up until that point, there was no, I was just I did not think that was even a possibility. So when that happened, it kind of kicked it into gear. Unfortunately, we did not make a bowl my last year, my 5th year.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up separating my shoulder, missed a game or two with that. It just ended up not being as good a year. We like I said, we lost a bunch of players on offense the year before. I had gotten injured. I mean, it just I don't know. We finished about 500. Where it was like 5-6, 6-7, something like that. It wasn't. So when the draft came around, there were still some teams looking. The Browns came in, the Cowboys came in, the Chargers came in, the Falcons came in. So June Jones, Norv Turner, some of those guys came in to work me out. Nobody was making any promises. I went to the blue-gray game, which used to be like a senior type bowl, but it's not around anymore. So I went to the blue-gray game. I did well there. I got offensive MVP of that game. Went to the Senior Bowl, played well there. We didn't win, but I got some exposure. Got to talk to a lot of teams during that process. The Combine came around. Bledsoe came out early. Drew Bledsoe was coming into the draft early, so he came out as a junior. And Rick Meyer was a year younger than me, but he didn't redshirt at Notre Dame. So those were the guys going 1 and 2. It was pretty clear. Rick didn't do any of the throwing up at the Combine, but Drew did. And all of us are sitting there, myself, Elvis Gerbach, Mark Burnell, Gino Toretta, we're all like sitting there watching Drew Bledsoe throw, and we're all like, oh my gosh, this guy, now we know why this guy is going number 1 or is projected to go number 1. So he was a difference maker in terms of throwing the football as a 21, 22-year-old. But I didn't know what was going to happen after the Combine, after, the workouts, all that stuff. Everybody was telling me, well, you may be somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th round. We don't know. But it definitely didn't go that way when it came to draft weekend.
No, it didn't. And you were drafted in the 8th round, and there were 12 rounds then. So you.
No, that was we had 8 rounds, just 8 rounds.
Oh, so it was the last round. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the last round. So I was actually the 3rd to last pick. I was number 222 out of 224. So.
Wow. Was that disappointing to you when you had been told that it was maybe 3rd to 5th?
Well, it was disappointing because back in those days, the draft was set up different. It isn't the big pageantry that it is now. The first day, I want to say there was maybe 2 rounds. It was on a Saturday. Then on Sunday were the rest of the rounds. So ESPN covered the first round, the first couple days, and then you get to the second day, and by whatever it was, like the 5th or 6th round, they stopped even covering that.
Right.
Then it was they're putting on, whatever college softball or college baseball or whatever was going on in the spring, and then you just had to follow the ticker. I was getting calls occasionally, hey, we're thinking about it. Hey, we're thinking about it. As the draft ended, I was starting to figure out, okay, am I going to even go anywhere? If I don't go anywhere, am I going to go somewhere as an undrafted free agent, just get into camp? And then the Chargers made a trade right at the end of the 8th round, because Bobby Beathard knew there was a couple other teams that were interested based on who was there to work me out. So that was a big thing back then. I think they still do it now. They made a trade late to draft me. That way they wouldn't have to get into a free agency, I guess, college free agency bidding war. At that time it was, a couple $1,000, but by drafting me, that was the first year of the rookie salary cap. So as the last round pick, I took minimum with no signing bonus. It was like, here you go, take it or leave it. And I'm like, well, I guess. So it would have been better to go undrafted because at least I could have gotten a couple $1,000 or something. But anyway, it ended up working out. It just, at the time, that's just the way it works. So I ended up in San Diego and thought it was a great position to be in. As Chiefs fans will remember, that was the year. The year before I got was 92. 93 was the draft, but the 92 year was the year the Chargers started off 0-4. They made the trade for Stan Humphries, and then I think they ended up winning 11-12 at the end, ended up winning the division, that kind of thing. So there was a high expectation for the Chargers going into that season of 93. So I was excited. Here I was, a kid from the Midwest, had never been anywhere, as far as out to California or the West Coast, and I was getting the chance to go to San Diego and be in the NFL. So yeah, it was even though the couple draft day experience wasn't a memorable one, it ended up being a good thing.
Well, it started a real sort of vagabond journey for you that ended up in a good thing, but you didn't play in San Diego. You played a little bit in the Canadian Football League. Then you joined the Redskins, and you actually pretty much timed out your entree into playing a lot because it was your walk year, and you had a great year.
Yeah, it was really, the way it all just kind of worked. I was, as you said, 1 year in San Diego, cut, Canada cut, Redskins signed me. They came in, they said, listen, we got two guys younger than you, with Gus Frerotte and Heath Schuler, and we just need a third quarterback. We're going to bring in some guys for you to compete with, but, they signed me in February, so they're like, you've got a month or two head start on the other guys because we'll be bringing in college free agents or something like that. So I just jumped at it. It was a good opportunity, and I just 1 year contracts and just kind of grinding away. And as you said, 98 just happened to work out. They ended up trading Heath Schuler away after the 96 season. So going into the 97 season, I thought I was going to be the backup that year. And then right before training camp started, they went out and they signed Jeff Hostetler. So Charlie Casserly thought we were going to be a good team and felt like, I guess I wasn't ready to be the backup. He felt like if something happened to Frerotte as the starter, we need to have that veteran presence. So they went out and they got Jeff Hostetler, and as mad as I was, I took it as an opportunity to just try and pick his brain and learn as much as I could from him. I was like, this guy won a Super Bowl with the Giants. He's been a starter with the Los Angeles Raiders. So I did. I picked his brain about everything, about preparation, about family, about how you handle things on and off the field, how you handle, the media, how do it was a good sounding board. I as much as I wanted to be the backup, I said, I'm going to use this as a learning experience. And then in 98, Jeff got hurt in training camp. I was moved up to backup right before the opener against the Giants. In the Giants game, Gus was ineffective. He had thrown a couple interceptions. He was getting beat up pretty bad. He got into a sideline altercation with one of our linebackers, Marcus Patton, who ended up coming to the Chiefs after Washington. But there was just kind of all this kind of stuff going on, and here it is, the opener of the season. We thought we were going to have a good team, and all of a sudden, up until this point, I'd only taken one snap. So I was 28 years old. My only snap in my professional career would have been the year before in Week 17 against the Eagles at home. Gus had broke his hip. Hostetler was starting. Hostetler got the wind knocked out of him, so they put me in. Norv's like, hey, go Act 4, 989, which is just a play-action pass. Everybody's going deep. So I had enough adrenaline after all those years that I overthrew Albert Connell. I overthrew him by a good 5 yards or more. But I chucked it, and then Hostetler came back after getting the wind knocked out of him. So I played one snap, threw a deep ball incomplete, but at least they had gotten into a game. And so here I was, 28 years old, opening game, back up against the Giants. We're down by 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. I'm on the headset because at that time I was the guy calling in plays. So in 95, 96, before the headsets for the quarterback, I was the guy that signaled in the play. So Norv would tell me the play. Me and the other quarterbacks, we came up with the signals, but I was the guy that would signal it in. And then when we got the coach, the quarterback, Norv liked the way that system works, so he would still do me. I would push the button, call in the play. I was the go-between. So at that time, I'd been on headset for 4 years. So in the opener, in the third quarter, all of a sudden Norv goes, Trent, go grab your helmet. And I hesitate, and I look down the line at him, and he looks at me and uses some choice language and goes, go get your helmet. And I was like, all right, here we go. Fortunately for me, that first drive, I want to say I was like 5 of 6. We drove down the field. We scored a touchdown, got to within 7. Ended up throwing my first touchdown in that game. I played well. We ended up losing the game, but I played well. And then Norv named me the starter the following week. The home opener against the defending Super Bowl champions San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football. That ended up being my first start.
That's pretty amazing, and you had a great year, and you became a free agent. You turned down a contract for the Redskins and ended up signing with the Rams, and right now you're in a position where you had some negotiating power and ended up with the Rams. What was that decision based on?
So, my wife and I, we'd been there for 4 years. We loved the Redskins organization. The Cook family had owned it. Unfortunately, in the 97 season, Jack Kent Cooke had passed away, or at the end of that season, he had passed away. So in 98, the season was actually run by John Cooke, one of his sons. But the team was really run, unbeknownst to a lot of us, the team was really run financially by the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation. That's how he had set it up, from a tax standpoint at the foundation. Well, what we didn't know is that the foundation was under orders after 1 year to sell the team. Now, my understanding is that Jack thought that John was going to have enough money to buy the team, and that was how they were going to be able to get around from a tax standpoint. John didn't have enough money. The team they had built, so Jack Kent Cooke had always wanted his own stadium. The first 2 years I was there in 95, 96, it was RFK Stadium we played in. Then he built his own stadium with his own money over in Maryland. So he owned his own stadium, which at the time was kind of not a known deal around the league. So he owned the team and he owned the stadium. So the team ended up selling for $800 million. Well, John didn't have $800 million. And so that's when Snyder came. Actually, it was another person in front of Snyder that actually got the bid. But then when the NFL determined that they didn't have enough qualifications, then Snyder stepped up and said, well, I have the qualifications. So that's how he became the owner. Long story short, for me in free agency, I was a free agent. There weren't a lot of negotiations. The Redskins come to me in the middle of that 98 season, or even towards the end of the 98 season, and said, hey, here's an offer. We'd like to keep you around. I probably would have signed it, because up until that point, I was a minimum salary guy working year-to-year contracts. So I didn't have any kind of stability. So had they done that at that point in time, I probably would have done it. But because of all these things that were going on, they didn't offer me anything. Well, then right before free agency started, I wanted to say it was about a week before free agency started, that's when the Redskins made their first offer. And to me, I was like, well, I'm this close. I got to see what my value is.
Right.
So I told him that. I told Norv that, and I told Charlie that. I said, listen, I love it here, but if you guys had offered this a couple months ago, I would have jumped all over it. I said, it's just, at this point in time, now I got to find out what my market is. And Mike Martz had been my quarterback coach the last 2 years in Washington under Norv. And Mike had already been hired in St. Louis to be the offensive coordinator. So I had grown up in St. Louis. The Rams were doing very poorly throughout the entire 90s. Even when they moved back to St. Louis, they were still doing poorly. I knew the offense that Mike was going to run, and I knew they were interested in the quarterback, but, I didn't know what they were going to offer or anything like that. So that was really my first visit, was to the Rams. There was a lot of things that it was just a natural fit to go there. Getting a chance to establish myself as so I had spent all these years as the backup, and I told you all the times I talked to Jeff Hostetler and all the times I had talked to other veteran quarterbacks, Stan Humphries and John Freese when I was in, when I was with the Chargers, and then even having younger guys, watching how Heath Schuler conducted himself, how Gus Frerotte conducted himself. You can learn something from all these different guys. So I had a pretty good formula of what I wanted to do. And so this was a fresh start. I could go in from day one, go into the locker room. Hey, you're the starter. get to know the guys, establish myself as a player and a leader, and so it just all kind of fell into place. How all that worked out, as you said, hitting free agency at the right time, and the way things worked out heading to St. Louis.
Well, obviously you were slated to be the starter, but in a year that would be a pretty magical year for the Rams, and most people, Dick Vermeil on the record is saying it would have been magical whether you, if you had played as well. But you suffered obviously a season-ending knee injury hit by Rodney Harrison. That must have been an unbelievably gut-punching type of situation when you'd worked so hard all this time, finally got some security, were going to be the starter on a team that would end up obviously being a great team. That had to be an unbelievable gut punch.
Yeah, it really was. And, as I said, I was excited about getting to there. So when I first got there, they signed Adam Timmerman, a Pro Bowl guard from the Packers who had won a Super Bowl up there. Isaac Bruce was coming off of injury. We drafted Torrey Holt. We traded for Marshall Faulk. Mike Grudadora, I think, was his first time starting as a center. Orlando Pace was already there. I mean, so there were some really good pieces in place. We brought in a ton of pieces. Mike was working with the coach and the coaches and trying to get the offense implemented. I was working with the players trying to get the offense implemented and the protections. So I was doing everything, hanging out with the linemen and the receivers and doing what I could to just try and get everybody up to speed. And as you said, we were rolling along in the preseason. Things were going great. That's what I think made it all so hard when I did get hurt. It's just because I knew we were going to be good. I don't think anybody could have predicted we were going to become what we became. The Raiders were a really good team that year, and we played them that first preseason game, and we put it on them pretty good. And I remember afterwards, and even now I've talked to some of those guys, they said we had no idea. And all of a sudden, I threw a long bomb over the top to Torrey Holt. The Chargers had a really good team that year in '99, really good defense with Rodney Harrison and Junior Seau and all that. And we basically scored at will. We scored every time we touched the ball in that third preseason game prior to the injury. And the crazy thing about the injury is we had done everything we wanted to do. And the Chargers had the ball, and they were about to punt right before halftime. And Coach comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, I think I'm going to put Kurt in to run the 2-minute offense, or to get the snaps, because he goes, I don't need to see any more out of you." And I said, "Well, let's just wait and see what happens with the punt." He goes, "Okay, let's make a deal. If the punt is returned past a certain yardage, then I'll put you in and we can work on our 2-minute offense. If it's not returned past a certain yard line," and I forget what that yard line was. Right, he goes, "If it's not returned, I'm going to put Kurt in. I'm going to put Kurt in to hand the ball off and run the clock out at halftime and whatever." Well, sure enough, we returned the ball and got it to position. So we're like, "Oh, great, this is going to be an opportunity to go work on the 2-minute offense." So we go in. It was like completion, and then all of a sudden, on one of the far sideline throws, Rodney dove into my knee, and that was so after that happened, I just remember I wasn't like on the ground cussing and yelling, and doing all that. I really just kind of put my hands to my face, because here I had worked. I was 29 years old. I had worked so hard just to get to this position to where I was the leader and I was the starting guy, and I got to establish myself in the locker room and just all the stuff that had built up to this point. And I knew we were going to be good. Like I said, anyone that says they predicted this was going to happen, it didn't ultimately happen, but I said I knew we were going to be good. So that was the thing. I just put my hands in my face, and I just said, I was just sitting there saying, I can't believe after all this is what's going to happen.
Right.
Now, then the season ends up happening the way it is. And I think the thing that makes that season, even though it was gut wrenching to watch the whole thing, it also meant a lot to me, because I know what I had put into it, and the guys that had been there a long time. So the Kevin Carters, the DeMarco Farrs, the Isaac Bruce, Keith Lyle, Orlando Pay, guys that Ernie Conwell, the tight end, these guys that Ricky Prohl, guys that had been through some of the bad years with the Rams, and then they kind of saw what I did in the offseason and what I put into it. And, and Coach Vermeil wanted me to keep close to the whole thing. And, Kurt was great throughout the whole thing, and Mike was great. Marks was great during the whole thing. Guys would come into the locker, come into the training room, and they're always checking on my rehab. And there was a certain group of guys that would always come in and say, hey, before they jumped on the bus, to go to away games. So it did mean a lot to me that the guys still wanted me included, and they still felt like, that I had put something into it. So that's why I get mixed emotions about it, because I know what I put into it and how I helped that team. And the guys made me feel that, and Coach Vermeil made me feel that, and the organization, from Stan Kroenke to Georgia Frontier to, to Jay Zigmont to, all the guys in the front, they all made me feel a part of it. So that's why, as much as I wanted to be on the field in Atlanta for the Super Bowl, I still felt I had a small part of that in helping them. And so yes, but it was definitely a gut punch when the injury happened. And I thought, years and years later, going to watch Kurt Warner get inducted into the Hall of Fame, and for Kurt saying what he said at the Hall of Fame induction about me and about what I meant to him and what I meant to that team, that part of it kind of came full circle with the whole thing.
Well, the next year you had a chance to reestablish yourself in what would the path that would lead to the Kansas City Chiefs, because Kurt, obviously the reigning MVP, he's not going to lose his job, but you got a chance to start 5 games in the middle of the season, and the offense hummed along very, very well with you there. That obviously was an important opportunity that would lead you to the Kansas City Chiefs.
It would. And after the Super Bowl year in '99, Coach Vermeil retired. Mike Martz took over as head coach. And so Kurt ended up, actually he got hurt here in Kansas City. And I ended up going in, playing the whole second half of that game against the Chiefs. I played well. The Chiefs ended up beating us, but I played well, and then had an opportunity to start 5 games that year and kind of reestablish myself. And then Coach Vermeil, as the Chief fans know, Carl Peterson got him to come out of retirement and be the head coach of the Chiefs, and Coach convinced Carl to bring me over and make the trade to bring me over, and it was start to a great run. It was my time here in Kansas City. I raised my kids here and still live here, so it was a good move and put together some great memories, great seasons, and so it was very timely that I was able to play that following year in 2000, and then Coach Vermeil come out in 2001 and then make the trade. Carl make the trade to bring me over.
We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new. This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like the law offices of Kenneth McRae, developing a unique strategy for your family law case. Divorce can be civil law, not civil war.